Hey everyone, and welcome back to Daily Tuition. In this video, we are going to learn how to create this amazing registration and login system with PHP and MySQL database. We are going to start with an empty project and build this complete registration and the login system. Now, if you just take a look at this registration form, then in this form, we have the profile image where you can upload a new profile of the user. Then we have the first name, last name of the user, email, password and the confirm password. So we're going to first validate all these values using client side using JavaScript, and then we will sanitize all these values using PHP script so we can secure the database from SQL injection. Now let me just fill this form and register as a new user. Now let me first choose my profile picture. When I click on it, this will just ask me to specify my profile picture. For example, if I just specify this profile, open it, you can see I have my profile here. Now just for that, I'm going to specify my first name. I'm going to say here Daily Tuition. Then I'm going to specify my email here. So I'm going to specify demo email here, example@gmail.com. Then I'm going to specify password, confirm password. Now what if I just forgot to add confirm password, and when I try to submit this form, you can see a message, please fill out this field. If I fill this field and forget to just check this checkbox, when I click on this continue, I'm going to have a message, please check this box to continue. So I'm going to just click on this checkbox and accept all the terms and conditions and click on the continue button. When I click on it, this will just redirect me to the login page where you can see I have my profile picture, and now I just want to specify my email and password for the successful login. So I'm going to just specify here email example@gmail.com. Then I'm going to specify my password, and when I click on continue, you're going to get all your information on the main page. So this will just open the index.php file and display your all information. Here you can see we have the profile picture, then the username and the first name, last name and the email. So in this tutorial, you're going to learn everything about registration and the login system using PHP and MySQL database. So make sure you click on the subscribe button to get the latest videos. And now, before we getting late, let's get started. Now, to start this project, you need editor. I'm using PHP Storm editor to create this project. Because I want to explain everything more clearly, I'm using PHP Storm editor. I will not recommend you to use this editor because it's paid. You need to pay money to get this editor. So instead of using this editor, just grab the Visual Studio Code editor and create this project. I want to explain everything in detail. That is why I'm using this editor. In this editor, you can notice I have this PHP directory. So inside the server, I will assume that you have XAMPP server installed in your local computer. And I will assume that you started the XAMPP and the MySQL to execute PHP and create your database. Now, let's start and create your new project. So you need to create a new directory in the htdoc folder of your XAMPP server. You can notice here we have the XAMPP path, and I'm going to create a new folder inside this PHP. So I'm going to right click here and say new directory, and I'm going to specify a project name. So I'm going to simply specify here register, and when I press enter, I'm going to have my project directory. Now inside this project directory, I'm going to create a new file. So I'm going to right click here and say new PHP file. So I'm going to select the PHP file and specify the name for this file, register. And when I press OK, this will create a new register.php file. Now inside this .php register file, I'm going to just get rid of this PHP syntax. And here I'm going to create a simple HTML5 snippet. So I'm going to just add exclamation mark and press tab. When I press tab, I'm going to have a simple HTML5 snippet where we have the HTML tag, the heading and the body. So I'm going to first specify title for this registration page. So I'm going to say here registration. Then in the title down here, I'm going to link my style.css file. So I'm going to just right click on this registration and say style.css. So I'm going to create a new file with .css extension. So I'm going to say here style. So I'm going to create a new file style.css and link this file in the head section of this registered. So I'm going to say here link, and in the href attribute I'm going to say style.css. Now once I have the style.css, I'm going to add bootstrap in this project because I want to specify predefined styling for this registration form. That is why I'm using bootstrap here. So to add bootstrap in this project, I'm going to simply open my browser, and inside the browser in the URL I'm going to search for get bootstrap, and I'm going to just open the getbootstrap.com. Just click on this get started and just copy the CDN. So I'm going to first copy this CSS CDN, paste it just before this style.css file right up here, just like this, and then I'm going to copy these script files and paste it just before this closing body tag right down here. Now you can see the bootstrap is now ready to use. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder inside my registration for the JavaScript. So I'm going to create a new directory and name that directory JS. And in this folder, I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to create a JavaScript file. So I'm going to select the JavaScript file here and say main.js. I don't need to specify .js extension in this editor because I already specified the JavaScript file. So I'm going to just press OK button. When I click on OK, I'm going to have the main.js file inside this project. I'm going to leave this main.js as it is and link this main.js just before this closing body tag. So I'm going to create here a script tag, and in the source attribute of the script tag, I'm going to link the JavaScript folder. So I'm going to select the JS, and then I'm going to select main.js file. Very simple, right? Now I'm going to save all the changes, and inside the body right here, I'm going to start creating the registration form. So I'm going to first add here a command, HTML5 command, and say registration area. And I'm going to close this command. So I'm going to copy it and close it here. So I'm going to just specify here, this is the closing registration. So this closing command will indicate this is the closing registration form. Now in this command, I'm going to create a section tag, and I want to specify ID to this section. So I'm going to specify hash here and say register. When I press tab, I'm going to have section tag with ID register. Now, if you're using standard HTML, then you can't modulize your HTML code. But in PHP, you can do that. You can separate this header and create a separate file for this header. You can separate this footer, and you can separate this main section of your website. You can do that in PHP. And this is the best way to create any project in PHP. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just grab this section and put this in the main tag. So this will describe this is the main section of this website. So I'm going to just say here main and specify ID main area. Inside this main tag, I'm going to paste my section just like this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just modulize this project. So I'm going to separate this header and this footer in the separate file. So I'm going to just right click on my project and select new and create a new PHP file. So I'm going to select PHP, and I'm going to just say here header.php. So I'm going to create header.php file, and inside it I'm going to just grab this header. So I'm going to just get this header from this main tag. So I'm going to just get the header from this opening main tag. Right from here, I will just copy this complete header, cut it from here and paste it inside this header.php file. Save all the changes, back to the register.php file, grab the footer section of this website. So I'm going to just grab this footer from this closing HTML, grab it from here till the closing main tag, because I added this main tag in the header. That is why I'm going to grab this closing main tag in the footer. I'm going to select the closing main tag as well. Just cut this code from this register.php file and create a new file in your project. So I'm going to create a new PHP file and say here footer. So I'm going to create a new file footer.php, and I'm going to get rid of this PHP syntax and paste my footer here. Very simple. Now I'm going to save all the changes, back to the register.php, and now I want to include both this file in this register.php. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just call a PHP syntax So I'm going to call here PHP, and inside it I'm going to first call header of this website. So I'm going to create a command header.php, and using include I'm going to just include header.php file here. And just out of that, at the bottom I'm going to create a PHP syntax and just create a command footer.php and just include, and I'm going to include here footer.php. Save all the changes, and just out of that I'm going to just create here h1 heading tag and say registration. Save all the changes and just run this file in the PHP server. So when you execute your register.php file, you can notice you have the registration text here. So your file is now successfully executed in the PHP server. Now let's move on and create a beautiful registration form in the PHP. So I'm going to just back to my editor, and inside this section I'm going to create a beautiful registration form. I'm going to just toggle this window on the right side, and here I'm going to create my registration form. So I'm going to just get rid of this h1 heading tag. I'm going to add here a row. So I'm going to call a bootstrap class row, and I'm going to remove margin from this row. So I'm going to say here margin 0 to remove margin, and then I'm going to create here 4 columns. So I'm going to say here call lg4. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just create here h1 heading tag and just specify register. Save all the changes and just reload your file. You have your register here. Now let me just add some classes to it. I'm going to add a class to it, which is login title and text dark. Save all the changes, and just out of that I'm going to just specify here offset to this column. So what I'm going to do is I just want to add some space to this form. So I'm going to say here offset lg2. So this will add 2 column space to this register form. So when I save the changes and execute this file, you can see I have space at the left side of this project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to specify 4 column space to the form, and I'm going to leave 2 column space from the left side of the form. I just specify 4 column space to this registration form. You can notice here I'm using call lg4 class. So 4 column space is only applied for the large devices. When the viewport is less than that, the column will automatically take 12 column space. Just out of that, just after this h1 heading tag, I'm going to create here a paragraph, and I want to add some text here. So I'm going to say here register and enjoy additional features. So I'm going to just add some message to the user. Then I'm going to add classes to it. I'm going to first add padding 1. So this will add top, right, bottom and left padding to this paragraph. Then add margin 0, and then I'm going to add my custom class, which is font Ubuntu. So I'm going to specify font Ubuntu font family to this paragraph, and then I'm going to call a bootstrap class text black 50. So this will add light gray color to this paragraph. When I save all the changes and reload the browser, I'm going to have this paragraph here. Now just out of that, once I have my paragraph right here, just out of this paragraph, I'm going to create here a spawn tag, and inside it I'm going to say I already have. And if you're already a registered user, then I'm going to just add here a link for the login page. So I'm going to say here I already have, and in the anchor tag I'm going to say login.php, and in the text I'm going to specify login. Just out of that, I'm going to save all the changes, and in the project I'm going to create a new file and name that file login.php. So I'm going to create a new file login. So in the project directory I'm going to create login.php, and I'm going to first say here echo, in the single quote I'm going to say login.php. That's it. Save the changes, and just out of that I'm going to just reload this browser. You can notice I have the link for the login.php file here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just center all this text. So I'm going to grab all these 3 lines create a new division tag right here with the class text center. So this is a bootstrap class to center all the text. Along with that, I'm going to add padding bottom 5. So this will add bottom padding to this division tag. And inside this div, I'm going to paste all my 3 elements. Save the changes, and when I reload the browser, I have everything at the center of the column. Now once I have this title, just after this division tag, right down here, I'm going to create a new div with the class upload profile image. So in this div, I'm going to just allow user to upload their profile. So inside this division tag, I'm going to allow user to register their profile picture. So I'm going to simply first center all the text. So I'm going to say here text center to center all the text and the image. And then I'm going to call here a division tag with a dflex bootstrap class. So this class will specify display flex direction row to this division tag. And to this div, I'm going to specify a class justify content center. So this class will center this image. So I'm going to add here image, and inside this image, I'm going to specify my camera icon. Now what I'm going to do is, to add this image, I'm going to first create my asset folder, and then I'm going to put all the images inside that folder so we can use it in this project. So in the project directory, I'm going to create a new folder. So I'm going to right click here and say new directory assets. Inside these assets, I'm going to have different images which I'm going to use in this project. So I'm going to copy a few images and put inside this asset folder. So I'm going to just copy these images and paste it inside my registration inside this asset folder. So I'm going to right click here and say paste. So I'm going to paste all the images, and right here you can notice I have these images inside this asset folder. I'm using this camera solid SVG file in the source attribute. So I'm going to just specify here in the source attribute. I'm going to first specify asset folder. Then I'm going to select camera solid SVG image here. Save the changes. Back to the browser, I just reload it. As you can notice, you have your camera icon here. Now, just out of that, once you have the icon, I'm going to just specify here alt attribute, which is camera. And now, once I specify this alt attribute, I'm going to specify class to it. And I'm going to specify class camera icon. Save the changes. And now, just out of that, just after this division tag, I'm going to just add here image. And in this image tag, I'm going to just specify the profile image of the user. So I'm going to simply select the asset folder, then select the profile folder, and then I'm going to select the default beard.png file. So I'm going to just use this default beard.png file for the new user, and then I'm going to specify here profile, save all the changes, reload the browser. I have the profile image here. Then I'm going to specify here class, and I'm going to specify here a custom class, which is img, and then I'm going to specify a bootstrap class rounded circle. So this class will specify border radius to the image. Save the changes, and just out of that, down here, just out of this image, I'm going to add a small tag, and inside it, I'm going to simply say choose image. And I'm going to specify here class, which is form text and text black 50. Save the changes, reload the browser. I'm going to have the text here. Just out of that, just out of this small element, I'm going to add here input, and this is the type of file. So I'm going to select here input type file, because I want to allow user to upload their image. That is why I'm using here input type file. And then I'm going to say here class, and I'm going to add a bootstrap class here, form control file. Then I'm going to add name to it so we can access it using PHP. So I'm going to say here profile upload, and then I'm going to specify ID, and ID is going to be upload profile. Save the changes, reload the browser. You can see you have your file input element here. Now I want to style this section, so I'm going to just back to my project and open the style.css file. And before I add any styling to this project, I'm going to first add font inside this project. So I'm going to open the Google Fonts. So I'm going to say here Google Fonts. I'm going to open the Google Fonts and I'm going to simply select Ubuntu font, this one. I'm going to click on this, select this font icon. I'm going to copy this font. So I'm going to copy the import statement and paste it inside the style.css file like this. Now I can use this font inside this project. I'm going to close this tab, this one as well. And now I'm going to create here root selector. I'm going to select the root and I'm going to create a variable here with the name font Ubuntu. And I'm going to specify here font family, and I'm going to specify here a fallback value, which is monospace. So this is the fallback value of this font. Just out of that, I'm going to create another variable with the name color border, and I'm going to just specify here value to it. So I'm going to specify here hex value like this. And as you know, in the registered, I just added here font Ubuntu class. So I'm going to create this class in the style.css. So I'm going to create here font Ubuntu, then specify font, and I want to specify here normal 500 is the width of the font. Then I'm going to specify 16 pixel, which is the font size, and then I'm going to specify font family, which is font Ubuntu. Save the changes, reload the browser. This will just change the font family of this text. Now what I want to specify the same font family to this text as well. So I'm going to just specify here in the register.php file, I'm going to specify class to this font tag and specify font Ubuntu, and also I want to change the font family of it. So I'm going to say here text black 50. So this will just change the color of the text. Save the changes, reload the browser. This will change the color of the text and change the font family. Just sort that, back to the style.css, and down here I'm going to first select the register, then I'm going to specify some padding to it. So I'm going to say here padding. I'm going to add 5% top and bottom padding and 0 for the left and right. Then I'm going to add background image for this registration form. So I'm going to add here background, and in the URL I'm going to specify the background image. So I'm going to select the assets, and then I'm going to select the background.png file. And if you want to specify no repeat, you can do that right here. And just out of that, I'm going to specify here background size, which is going to be cover. Save the changes and reload the browser. You're going to have the background image to this register form. Now what I want to style this beautiful profile section. So I'm going to first select the register. Then I'm going to select the upload profile image class, this one. I'm going to copy it, and the style.css, I'm going to paste it just like this. And I'm going to specify some properties to this class. So I'm going to say here position relative. Just out of this position property, I'm going to add here width to this division tag, and I'm going to specify 10% width to this div. And I'm going to add margin left is going to be auto, and margin right is going to be auto. Just out of that, I'm going to just add here transition, and on the filter property of this division tag, I'm going to specify 8 second ease. So when I hover on this image and try to change this filter property, I'm going to get the easing effect on this filter property. Save all the changes, reload the browser. Then just out of that, I'm going to just create hover effect on this division tag. I'm going to copy it, paste it down here, and create hover effect on it. So I'm going to call hover and say here filter, and I'm going to just call here drop shadow. So when I hover on this division tag, I want to drop a shadow, and I'm going to say here 1 pixel, 1 pixel, 22 pixel, and I'm going to call here hex value. So I'm going to call here 75844BB. So I'm going to call here hex value, save the changes, reload the browser. When I hover on it, you can notice I have this beautiful shadow to this image. Just out of that, I'm going to select this input type file. So I'm going to select this file. So I'm going to specify ID to it. So I'm going to specify ID to this input type file. You can notice I already have this ID. Upload profile, copy it, and use this ID right here. So I'm going to select this ID, and to this ID I'm going to specify position absolute, then I'm going to specify top 0, then Z index is going to be 10, and width is going to be 200. Just out of that, I'm going to say margin top is going to be 0 pixel. So I'm going to say here 0 pixel. Save the changes and reload the browser. You're going to have this input file element right up here. Now what I don't want to allow user to upload their image by clicking on this input file element. Instead of clicking on this input file element to upload your new profile image, I'm going to just allow user to click on the image and upload a new profile picture. So I'm going to hide this element. So I'm going to just back to my editor, and down here I'm going to say visibility 0. Save the changes. So I'm going to just specify visibility 0 to this image, and to hide this element I'm going to just simply copy this upload profile and just say here WebKit file upload button, and I'm going to just specify visibility hidden to it. I'm going to do the same right here as well. Oops. Reload the browser. So this will hide input file element. But now the question comes in, how you can upload a new profile without this input file element. Let me show you how you can do that. Back to the editor, and right here just select the upload profile and create here a pseudo selector before. And to this pseudo selector, create a content, specify nothing here. So I'm going to specify empty string, then I'm going to specify display inline block. Width is going to be 200, height is also going to 200, and then I'm going to specify cursor, which is pointer. Then I'm going to specify border radius is going to be 50%. And now if you want to see this pseudo selector, I'm going to just get rid of this visibility property, and right here I'm going to say background color is going to be black. Save the changes and reload the browser. Now as you can notice, this is your input type file element. Instead of specifying background color, I'm going to just specify here visibility hidden. Save the changes. Now just out of that, I'm going to just specify style to this camera icon. So I'm going to just back to my editor, and right down here I'm going to select this register and the upload profile image, paste it down here, and I'm going to select the camera icon class, and I'm going to say here position absolute. Then I'm going to specify top 70 pixel. Then I'm going to specify width. The width is going to be 60 pixel. And I'm going to specify important keyword right here. So this will just override the default with property. And I'm going to say here filter. And using this filter, I'm going to change the color of this image. So I'm going to say here filter invert 30%. And I'm going to just call here important keyword, just like this. Save the changes, reload the browser. This will just decrease the size of this image. Along with that, this will just change the color of this image. You can notice the camera image is now looks different. Just out of that, I'm going to just add hover effect on it. So I'm going to select this camera icon, and on this profile, when I hover on this profile, I want to select this camera icon, and I want to add this filter property right down here, and just change the value, and I'm going to say here 100%. Save the changes, reload the browser. When I hover on it, this will just change the color of this image. Just after that, I'm going to just add some style to this profile image. So instead of adding the style inside this style.css, I'm going to just back to my register.php file and I'm going to add inline style to this image. I'm going to add here a style, and in this style I'm going to specify width 200 pixel, and then I'm going to specify height 200 pixel. Save the changes, reload the browser. This will change the height of this image. Just after that, I want to just add some class to this division tag. So I'm going to just add here dflex to add display flex to this division tag, and then I'm going to say justify content center to center everything, and then I'm going to add padding bottom 5. Save the changes, reload the browser. This will center this profile image, this camera image, and this text. Now what I want, when I click on this image, I want to open a new window where I can select a new profile image. So as you know, we just hide this upload profile element using this visibility hidden. So instead of specifying here visibility hidden, I'm going to specify here background color black. So when I specify background color black here, you can see we have this input type file element here. When I click on it, this will open a new window where I can select my new profile. I'm going to just close it, and instead of specifying background color, I'm going to just specify here opacity 0. When I save the changes, reload the browser, I'm going to have that element right here. When I click on this image, this will open a new window where I can select a new profile picture for my registration. As simple as that. Now let's move on and see how to create a form for the registration. So I'm going to just back to my register.php file. So just after this division tag, right down here, I'm going to create here another div with the class dflex justify content center. So I'm going to create here a new division tag and center all the elements. Now once I have this div, inside it I'm going to create a form tag, and in the action attribute I'm going to specify register.php. So I'm going to just return all the posted data to the register.php file. So the action attribute specifies where to send the form data when the form is submitted. So I'm going to return all the data to register.php file to itself. And in this form tag, I'm going to add form elements. But before I add anything, make sure you specify here a method which is post, and I'm going to just add here encoded type is going to be multi-part form. Just out of that, I'm going to just specify ID to this form, which is reg form. So we can access this form using this ID. Then inside this form, I'm going to add a bootstrap class, which is form row. And inside it, I'm going to create a column. So I'm going to say here call. And inside this column, I'm going to create here input type text, specify name to it, and I'm going to specify name first name. Then I'm going to specify here ID, which is first name. So I'm going to copy this name, paste it here. I'm going to specify ID first name. Then the class is going to be form control, and the placeholder is going to be first name. Save the changes, reload the browser, and you can see here you have your first name input text box. Now just out of that, I'm going to just copy this column, and in the same row I'm going to just create another column, and this is the type of text. Then I'm going to specify this is the last name. So I'm going to specify name last name for this input text box. The ID is going to be last name. I will leave the class as it is and just change this placeholder last name. When I save the changes and reload the browser, I'm going to have a new input text box with the name last name. Now just after that, I'm going to create another text box here. So in the new row, just out of this division tag, right down here, I'm going to create here a new row. So I'm going to create here form row, and I want to add some margin to it. So I'm going to add margin y 4. So this will add top and bottom margin to this form. Then I'm going to create here a column. So I'm going to say here call, and inside it I'm going to add input, and this is the type of email. So I'm going to select input type email. Then I'm going to specify name email. The ID is also going to be email. I'm going to add here class form control, and the placeholder is going to be email. And I'm going to add here asterisk to indicate this is the required field. You can see here I just added here asterisk to indicate this is the required field. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just add here required attribute just like this. Just out of this form, right down here, I'm going to just copy this form row division tag, paste it down here, and right here I'm going to just specify input type password. I'm going to specify the same password for the name. So I'm going to say here name password. ID is also going to be password, and I'm going to specify here placeholder password. Just out of that, I'm going to copy this form row class, paste it down here, and I'm going to just leave this type password, and I'm going to change the name. So I'm going to say here confirm pwd. So I'm going to just specify name confirm password, copy it, ID is going to be confirm pwd, and in the placeholder I'm going to say confirm password. Save the changes. Just out of that, I'm going to reload the browser. You can notice I have the email, the password, and the confirm password input text box. Now once I have all these input fields, I'm going to just add here agreement checkbox and the submit button. So I'm going to just open my editor, and down here I'm going to create a new division tag with the class from check. So this is the bootstrap class, and I'm going to add here form check inline. So this is the bootstrap class, and just out of that, inside this div I'm going to add input, and this is the type of checkbox. So I'm going to say input type checkbox. Then I'm going to specify name agreement. Then I'm going to specify class to it. The class is going to be form check input, and then I'm going to add here required. And now just out of that, I'm going to save all the changes, reload the browser. You can notice I have this checkbox here. Just out of this input, I'm going to add here label. This is for agreement, so I'm going to say here agreement, and I'm going to just specify class to it. So the class is going to be form check label. Then I'm going to add font Ubuntu, which is my custom class. Then I'm going to specify text black 50 to change the color of this text, and then I want to specify here text, which is I agree, and right here I'm going to add anchor tag, and inside it, in the href attribute, I'm going to specify hash, and in the anchor tag I'm going to say terms, conditions, and policy, and I'm going to just specify here asterisk to indicate this is the required field. Now you can notice I just specify here hash. If you want, if you have terms and conditions page, you can specify that page URL inside this href attribute. I'm going to leave it as it is, save all the changes, back to the browser, and reload it. As you can notice, I have the text here, and now at the last I'm going to add here a division tag with the class submit btm, and I'm going to center this button So I'm going to say here text center, and then I'm going to add margin y 5. This will add top and bottom margin to this division tag, and then I'm going to add button, and this is the type of submit button. So I'm going to add type submit, then I'm going to add class btn warning. So this is the bootstrap class to glorify this button. Then I'm going to specify rounded peel. This is the bootstrap class to specify border radius to this button, and then I'm going to specify text dark to change the color of the text, and padding x 5. So this will add left and right padding to the button. Just out of that, I'm going to say here continue, save the changes, and reload the browser. When I reload it, you can see I have the button here. I think I just misspelled here btn like this. Reload the browser, and I'm going to have my submit button here. As simple as that. Now what I want to just style this input text boxes. So I'm going to just back to my style.css and change some styling of these input text boxes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first select this input text box. So right here in the style.css, I'm going to select the registration form. So I'm going to select reg form ID, and then I'm going to select input, and it is the type of text. So I'm going to say input type text, and I'm going to just remove border from this text. So I'm going to say here border none. Then I'm going to specify border radius unset, and I'm going to specify border bottom 1 pixel solid, and I'm going to call a variable color border. Then I'm going to specify font family, which is font Ubuntu, and right here I'm going to call a variable font Ubuntu, and font size is going to be 18 pixel. Save the changes. Now when I save the changes, you can notice I just specify some style to the first and to the last input text box. I'm going to do the same for the email and the password as well. So I'm going to just back to my editor. I'm going to just decrease this font size to, I'm going to just remove this font size. I don't want to add this font size property. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply copy this selector, specify comma here, paste it down here, then specify here email. This will select all the input text box with the type of email. Then paste the selector again and just say here password. Save all the changes, reload the browser. Now you can notice this will just change this all input text boxes. Now as you can see, the registration form is now completely ready. If you try to click on this continue button, you can notice this will just ask you to fill out this field. So you need to fill this email address input text box before you submit your form. Now what I want to remove this blue border from these input text boxes. So in the style.css, I'm going to remove that blue border. So to remove this border, I'm going to simply copy this selector, paste it down here, and I'm going to just specify outline none, and box shadow is going to be none. When I save the changes, reload the browser, you can notice the blue outline is now gone. And now when you click on this continue button, you can see a message, please fill out this field. So I'm going to just fill this email. So I'm going to just say here example@gmail.com. Then I'm going to just click on this continue button. This will just ask me to fill this password. I'm going to just specify demo password here. When I click on this continue, this will just say please fill out this field. I'm going to just specify confirm password. And at the last, when you click on this button, this will just say please check this box if you want to proceed. So you need to just accept the agreement and the condition. So I'm going to just click on this checkbox, and when I click on this continue, this will submit the form. Now what I want, you can notice the password is not matching. When I click on this continue, this will submit the form. I don't want to do that. I want to first create client-side validation. I'm also using server-side validation if the user disables the JavaScript. So I'm going to first add the client-side validation and then we'll move to the server-side validation. So I'm going to just back to my editor, and in the main.js file, I'm going to create here document.query function. So this is the jQuery function. So this function will execute when the document is completely ready. Now in this function, I'm going to just simply call dollar, and in the parentheses, I'm going to select my form. So I'm going to say reg form. So using jQuery object, I'm going to specify CSS selector inside this parameter, and I'm going to say here dot submit, and in the parentheses, I'm going to call the handler function like this. So I'm going to just call here handler function, and inside it, I'm going to create few variables. So I'm going to create first variable, jQuery variable password, and I'm going to just specify my ID, password. So I'm going to just store password input text box inside this variable. Then I'm going to just copy this statement, paste it down here, and I'm going to just change this ID, and I'm going to say confirm password, and I'm going to just change this ID and say confirm error. Now we know that we don't have this element, so I'm going to just copy this ID, and in the registration right down here, just out of this confirm password, I'm going to just add here a small tag and specify ID to it, and the ID is going to be confirm error. Just out of that, I'm going to just change the color of the text of this small tag. So I'm going to specify class text danger. I'm going to just save the changes, back to the main.js file, and right here I'm going to just change this password, and this became confirm, and this became error. So I'm going to just say here if password dot value, I'm going to just get the value from the input text box password, and if this value is equal to confirm password value, I'm going to just return true. Else, if the password not match, I'm going to just say here error dot text, and I'm going to just specify text to this small tag. I'm going to just specify text here, password not match. And just out of that, I'm going to say if the password not matched, I'm going to just prevent this form being submitted. So I'm going to say event dot prevent default. Save the changes, reload the browser, and now if you try to submit your form, if I just say here email example@gmail.com, then I'm going to specify password like this, and if the password is not matched, and if I try to submit this form, I can't do it. This will just print a message, password not matched. I'm going to just get rid of this password, and now if the password match successfully, this will submit the form. I'm going to just use this basic client-side validation for this registration. If you want to add regular expression for this email to check the format of your email, you can do that as well. That's upon you. And now what I want, when I choose my profile picture, for example, when I click on it and choose this profile picture, and when I click on this open, I want to display that image in this profile section. So I'm going to just back to my editor, and in the main.js file right here, just out of this document.query function, I'm going to create here a function and specify name to it, read URL, and specify parameter input. Now I'm going to say if input.files and input.files, and specify the first array index. If it is true, then I'm going to say let reader is equal to new file reader. So I'm going to create an object of file reader, and then I'm going to say reader dot onload is equal to, I'm going to specify handler function for this event, and in this handler function I'm going to specify the file to this image. So I'm going to just back to my registration, and you can notice I specified img class to this image. So I'm going to access this image using this class. So I'm going to just back to my main.js, call the jQuery object, then say register, then I'm going to say upload profile image. I'm going to select the class upload profile image, and then I'm going to select img class. And now I'm going to specify the attribute. So I'm going to call a method attribute, and I want to specify the source attribute. So I'm going to say source, and I'm going to specify a value to this source attribute. So I'm going to say e.target.result. Just out of that, I'm going to call this function. So in the document.ready, I'm going to call this function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first create here a variable let upload file, and right here I'm going to select this input type file, this one input type file. So I'm going to say here in the single quote I'm going to specify register, then select upload profile image, and then I'm going to say input of the type file, and then I'm going to call an event of this upload file change. And in the handler function of this input file, I'm going to just call this read URL function and pass this. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to first select this input type file. So when we click on it, this will open a new window where we can select a new image, and when we select that image using this event, I'm going to just get that image and specify that as a parameter of this function. Save the changes, reload the browser, and now when I select my image, oops, something went wrong. Let me just check my code again. Yeah, right here. When I specify this source attribute value just out of this reader, I need to just call reader dot read as data URL, and to this data URL you just need to specify input dot files 0. So this will just specify that file to this file reader object. Save the changes, reload the browser, and now when I specify this file, this will just successfully change this profile picture. And now what I want to just remove this camera icon when we select the profile picture. So I'm going to just simply back to my JavaScript file and right down here I'm going to select the jQuery object. In the parentheses I'm going to say register upload profile image, and then select camera icon, and I'm going to specify a CSS property to it, which is display none. That's it. Save the changes, and now reload the browser. And when you specify your profile picture, you can notice the camera icon is now gone, and you can see your profile picture here. Now you can see the client section is now ready. Now let's move on to the PHP section of this tutorial. So let's see how to add these values in the database using PHP. Now we know that how to create this beautiful registration form using HTML and CSS. Now the time is to store all these form values in the database. Now we know that how to create this beautiful registration form with JavaScript validation. We added this beautiful profile picture. We have few input text boxes to register the user, and we also added the client-side validation to this registration form. But what if the user disables the JavaScript? In that case, the input text boxes will not validate. In that case, I'm going to just add server-side validation for this form. I'm going to show you how you can add server-side validation using PHP and add all these values in the database. So I'm going to first validate all these input text boxes, and then we will move and see how we can add all these input text boxes values and this profile image in the database. So let's see how to do it. So I'm going to just open my editor and just back to the project. In my project, I'm going to create a new file. So I'm going to right click on my project and select a new file and create a PHP file here. And I'm going to name this file register process. You can name this file anything, and in this file I'm going to add a PHP script. I will leave this PHP tag as it is, and right here I'm going to create a PHP variable. So I'm going to first add here a comment and say error variable. So I'm going to create here error variable. So to create a variable in PHP, just specify $sign and the name of your variable. So I'm going to say here error, and this is the type of array, so I'm going to specify blank array here. So this variable is a type of array. Now I'm not going to specify anything in this variable right now. I will specify all the error values in this variable later. Now just out of that, once I have this variable, I'm going to just create here a variable first name, and I'm going to specify value to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the value from the first name input text box using post request method. So I'm going to just simply say here $_post. I'm going to just specify here first name. So if you just take a look at your form in the registration, we specify here name, first name to this input text box. So I'm going to just specify this name in this post. So when you submit your form using this submit button, this will just return this input text box value to this variable. As you can notice, I'm going to just get the value and store that in this variable without sanitizing it. I'm going to just first sanitize this value and store it in this variable. Now I'm going to show you how you can sanitize this value and store that in the variable. So you will secure your application from SQL injection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new file and create helper functions which help us to sanitize these values. You can create that function in this file as well, but I'm going to separate this function. So I'm going to just create a new file in this project. I'm going to right click here and say new PHP file, and I'm going to just name this file helper. I'm going to just specify name for this file helper and press OK. So now you can notice I have this helper file here. Now in this file, I'm going to create a new function. I'm going to name that function validate input text, and I'm going to just specify parameter text value, and in this function I'm going to validate this value. It means when I call this function, I'm going to specify this value as a parameter of that function. So I will just sanitize this value and store that in the database. So in this function, I'm going to simply first call if not empty text value. So if the variable is not empty, then I'm going to execute this if statement. And right here, I'm going to create a new variable trim text and specify a function trim. And to the parameter of this function, I'm going to specify text value, this parameter value. Now this function will remove any spaces or white spaces from the beginning or end of the value. And then I'm going to just remove all the illegal values from this parameter. So I'm going to just create here a command and say remove illegal characters. So I'm going to just create here a variable sanitize str. So I'm going to just say here filter var, and I'm going to just specify here trim text. So I'm going to just specify this trim value inside this function and just sanitize this text. So I'm going to specify a parameter to it, filter sanitize string. So this will just remove all the illegal characters from this text and store it in this variable. And now once I sanitize the value, I'm going to just return it. So I'm going to say here return sanitize str, and if the value is empty, I'm going to just return empty string. Now I'm going to save the changes, copy this function and open the register process.php file, and instead of storing this value inside this variable, I'm going to just first here call a function, and then in the parentheses of this function I'm going to just pass this post first name. So when the user specify their first name, I will first validate that first name and then store it in this variable. Now, in order to use this function in this file, you need to first include this helper.php file in this process.php. So at the top right here, I'm going to simply call require, and in the parentheses I'm going to say helper.php. Now once I sanitize this value, this will just return the sanitized value in this variable. Now what if the user leave this text box as it is? Then this will just return nothing to this variable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just create here if this variable is empty, then I'm going to store error message in this variable. So I'm going to simply call this error variable, and in the array of the first index of this array, I'm going to store you forgot to enter your first name. Now once you've done that, I'm going to sanitize this second text box value. So I'm going to just copy this code, paste it down here. I'm going to change this variable name and say here last name. Then I'm going to change this value as well, because you can notice I just specify name last name for the second input text box. I'm going to use this name in this post like this, and I'm going to copy this last name and specify that in this parameter of this empty function. Just out of that, I'm going to change this message as well, and I'm going to say enter your last name. So I'm going to say here you forget to enter your last name. Now just out of that, I want to sanitize the email as well. So I'm going to just back to my helper.php file, and I'm going to copy this function. Then I'm going to paste this function again, change the name of this function, and I'm going to say here validate input email. The parameter is going to be text value, so I'm going to say here email value, and I'm going to specify this email value parameter here and here like this. And now what we need, I'm going to first stream this value, and then I'm going to sanitize this value, but at this time I'm not going to sanitize the string. Instead I'm going to say here filter sanitize email. So this will just remove all the unwanted characters from the email and just sanitize the email and store that value in this variable. So once I have this variable, I'm going to just return it, and if the value is empty, I'm going to return empty string. Save the changes, back to the register process.php file, copy these 3 lines, paste it down here, change the variable. I'm going to say here email, email, and I'm going to just specify in the post email, because we specify name email to the input text box. And now the time is to change this function, and I'm going to say here validate input email. I'm going to copy this variable, paste it here. If the variable is empty, then I'm going to just say here you forgot to enter your email. Just out of that, I'm going to just sanitize this password. So I'm going to just copy this last name code, paste it down here, and I'm going to say here password. I'm going to create a variable password, and as you know, for this input text box for this password, I used name password. So I'm going to use this in this post. So I'm going to say here password. Then I'm going to say here password. So I'm going to copy this variable, paste it here, and I'm going to say you forgot to enter your password. And the last, I'm going to just copy this password, paste it down here, and I'm going to just change here password confirm. And I'm going to just change this variable and say confirm pwd, and I'm going to just specify here name. So I'm going to just back to my register.php, and I'm going to just specify this confirm pwd name in this post array, and then I'm going to just copy this variable, specify here if this text box is empty, I'm going to just return error message, you forgot to enter your confirm password. Now, as you can notice, we successfully sanitize all these input text boxes values of the user. So no one can inject any SQL injection in your database. So this is how you can secure your database from SQL injection. Now, the time is to store all these values in the database. So let's see how to store it. So just after this validation, right down here, I'm going to create if statement, and I'm going to say if empty error. So if this error variable is empty, I'm going to execute this if statement, else I'm going to execute this else statement. So in the if statement, I'm going to say echo validate, and in the else statement, I'm going to say echo, and in the single quote, I'm going to say not validate. Save the changes, and now let's back to the register.php and to this form, and in the action attribute we specify register.php. I'm going to return all these input text box values to this file, and at the top right here, I'm going to just simply create here a PHP script. So I'm going to call here PHP syntax, and here I'm going to say if server requested method is equal to post. Now if the file request for the post method, then I'm going to just say here require, and I'm going to simply call here register process.php file. So when you request for the post method, I'm going to just require this file. So I'm going to just call all this code inside this file. Save all the changes, reload the browser, and now when I click on this continue button, this will just ask me to fill this value. So I'm going to just specify here email @gmail.com. So I'm going to specify demo email here. Then I'm going to specify password, and then I'm going to just click on this checkbox and click on this continue. When I click on it, you can see we have a message not validate because we did not specify the text boxes. So we need to fill these text boxes as well. I'm going to just specify here daily tuition. Then I'm going to just specify my email again. Now you can notice when I click on this continue button, this will reload this form and you need to fill this information again. So what I want, when I click on this button, and if there is any error in this form, I don't want to refill this first name, last name, and this email. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just back to my register.php file, and I'm going to just specify values to this input text boxes. So I'm going to just back to my register.php. So what basically I'm doing is I want to refill this form if there is any error in this form. So you can notice I have this error not validate, and I need to fill all these values again. So I'm going to just back to my register.php file, and to this input text box for this first name, I'm going to specify value, and in this value I'm going to call a PHP syntax. So I'm going to call here PHP syntax, and here I'm going to say if is set, if the value of this variable is set. So in the parenthesis of is set, I'm going to call post, and in the post I'm going to call this first name, and just out of that I'm going to say if we set the value of this input text box, then I'm going to just echo it in the value. So I'm going to say here echo and just call this post. So I'm going to copy it and paste it here. Very simple, just like this. So what I'm going to do is if the value of this first name, this input text box is set, then I'm going to just echo it, and I'm going to just specify that value to this value attribute. I'm going to do the same for this last name as well. I'm going to copy this value attribute, specify to the last name input text box. Don't forget to change this name. So I'm going to just specify here last name like this. And I'm going to just do the same for the email as well. I'm going to copy it and paste this value here. And don't forget to change this post value. I'm going to specify here email. Save the changes. Back to the registration form and reload it. When you reload it, you can notice the value of email is automatically filled. Now, let me just fill this first name. So I'm going to just specify here daily tuition. This is my demo email. Then I'm going to specify password and click on this checkbox. When I click on this continue, you can notice the message will change. So when I click on this continue button, this will just change to validate. So all this value of this input text box is now validate. And now you can notice the text of these input text boxes remains same. You don't need to refill these values. Now what if I just remove this first name and last name, specify password, confirm password, click on this checkbox and click on this continue. When I click on it, this will just return not validate because this form is now not validate, and you can notice we have this value to this email. We don't need to refill this value in this input text box. So this is the way you can create autofill registration form. Now let's move on and see how to store all these values in the database. So I'm going to just back to my editor and I'm going to just open the register process. If you just take a closer look at this if statement, then you will understand if there is any error in this error variable, this expression became false and you will get this else statement on your screen. And if there is no error in your form, then this expression became true and this will execute this echo statement with validate text. So I'm going to just add the database statements inside this if statement. Very simple, right? So let's see how to do it. Now you know that how to sanitize all the input values using PHP. The process is very simple. We just specify the values in these text boxes and then we'll click on this continue button. When you fill all these values and click on this continue button, the post method will return all these values in the array, and we can access all this array using this post variable. So as you can notice, we specify post variable and specify here bracket to access the value of the array. And once we have the value, we're going to validate this value and store that in the variable. And I'm going to just say here, if the value is empty, I'm going to just specify the error message to the user. Now, if this message is empty, then I'm going to return validate echo text, or if there is any error in this variable, I'm going to just say here not validate. Now let me show you how you can store all these values in the MySQL database. The first thing you need, so you need to first create a connection to the MySQL database and store all these values. So I'm going to create a new file for that. I'm going to separate these connection files. So in the project, in this registration, I'm going to create a new file and select a PHP file. And I'm going to name this file MySQLi connect.php. So I'm going to create MySQLi connect.php file. And in this file, I'm going to just create a connection between this application to the MySQL database. This file provides the information for accessing the database and connecting to MySQL. So first, we're going to define the constant variable. I'm going to just create here a command, and I'm going to say here define constant variables. And using define function, I'm going to create constant variable. So I'm going to just specify here in the capital characters, I'm going to say db name. So I'm going to store database name in this variable. So in the second parameter right here, I'm going to specify the database name. So in the second parameter, I'm going to say register db. Now this is my database name, which we are going to create in the MySQL database. And the last, I'm going to specify here semicolon. If you want to specify different database to this DB name variable, you can do that as well. Just out of that, I'm going to just define a new variable, and I'm going to name that variable DB user. And here to this variable, I'm going to specify the username of MySQL database. So I'm going to say here root. Just out of that, I'm going to create another constant variable, and I'm going to say here DB password, and the value is going to be admin. Now here you need to notice I just specify the value to this DB password variable. If you did not specify any password to your MySQL database, just leave this statement empty, just like this, right? I specify password to my database, so I'm going to specify admin here. And the last, I'm going to just define a constant variable, and I'm going to say here DB host, and the host name is localhost. Now you can notice I specify the capital letters for all this constant variable, so we'll easily understand which one is the constant variable. Now once I have all this constant variable, I'm going to just call here try and catch block. So I'm going to say here try, and here I'm going to call catch, and I'm going to just return exception. So I'm going to create object of exception. So I'm going to say here ex, and return the error if there is any problem while connection. Now this try block will throw any error, or you can say any problem, any exception into a catch block right down here for errors to handle. If we have any error in this block, this will just return that error to this catch block, and we can just display that message to the user. Now in the try block, I'm going to just assign a database connection to a variable that we will call connection. So I'm going to create a simple variable here. So I'm going to create a command and say connection variable, and simply I'm going to create here con, which is the connection variable. You can specify any name to this variable, and I'm going to create a new object of MySQLi class. And to the constructor of this MySQLi class, you need to specify parameters. So the first parameter you need to specify is the database host. So you need to specify the host name. So you know that we just specify here localhost. So I'm going to specify this constant value here, DB host. Then we need to specify the username. So I'm going to specify the DB user. In the second parameter, I'm going to specify the username root. Then I'm going to specify the password of that user. So I'm going to say DB password. So I'm going to just specify this constant variable DB password to the third parameter, and then I'm going to specify the database name. So I'm going to say DB name, just like this. Specify semicolon, and you are ready to go. Now your connection is now ready. So I'm going to first specify the database host name, which is the local host. Then I'm going to specify the username root. Then I'm going to specify password admin. Now keep in mind, if you did not specify any password, you can specify here empty string. And then I'm going to specify database name, which is register DB. Now if you want to change the database name, you can do that right here. That's upon you. And the last, just out of that, I'm going to just specify character set for the MySQL database. I'm going to create here a command and say encoded language. And right here, I'm going to call a function MySQLi set character set. Let me first explain this function. So in the first parameter, I'm going to specify the connection string. So I'm going to specify here connection variable. And in the second parameter, in the single quote, I'm going to specify UTF-8, the character set of the database. So let me first explain why I use this function here. Now the connection to the database must also include code that indicate the correct encoded language. The type of encoded language used on HTML page must match the encoded language used in the database. So if you just take a look at your register.php at the top in the header, if you open the header.php file, the encoded language, the character set of this language is UTF-8. So I'm going to just match this language with this database. So I'm going to specify here, UTF-8, right? Just out of that, in the catch statement, I'm going to just specify different error messages to the user if there is any problem in the connection. So in the catch statement, I'm going to just print some message. So I'm going to say here print, and in the double quote, I'm going to say an exception occur, and I'm going to specify a message. So I'm going to get the message from the exception variable. So I'm going to concatenate this message, and I'm going to just call a get message method. And if you want to define another error message to the user, you can just add another catch here. So I'm going to call here catch, say here error, and just create here a variable e for error. And then I'm going to say print and specify a message. The system is busy. Please try later. Now, as you can notice, the MySQL connection is now completely ready. Let's move on and see how to store all these values in the database. But before we move on, I need to create this database and the table to store all these values. So let's see how to create it in the MySQL database. Now let's see how you can create a database in MySQL database and create a table to store all these values. So I'm going to simply open this app control panel and click on this admin of this MySQL. When I click on it, this will open the MySQL database. And now here you need to create a new database. If you just click on this database, you can notice you have few database here. Now I'm going to create a new database. In this text box, I'm going to specify my database name. So you know that we just specified register DB database name while connection. So I'm going to use this name and create a new database with register DB name. And I'm going to just click on this create. I will just leave this UTF-8 as it is and just click on this create button. When I click on this create button, you can notice you have your register DB database. Now once you have your register DB database, you need to create a table to store all your values. There are two ways you can create a new table in the MySQL database. First, visually, and the second is using SQL statements. I'm using SQL statements to create this table. So I'm going to just click on this SQL, and here I'm going to create a new table. So to create a table, I'm going to specify here create statement, create table. So this statement will create a new table, create table, and I'm going to specify the table name user. And in the parentheses, I'm going to specify different columns. So I'm going to first create here user ID, and I'm going to specify type for this user ID. It is a type of integer. Then I'm going to specify not null, and then I'm going to specify primary key. Just after that, I'm going to create second column, which is first name, where I can store my first name input value. So I'm going to specify here varchar, and I'm going to specify here 100. Then I'm going to create here last name, specify varchar type. Then I'm going to create email, specify type varchar 200. And I'm going to specify here not null. Then I'm going to just specify here password, specify type varchar 200, and I'm going to specify here not null. And then I'm going to just specify profile image column, where I can store the profile image. So I'm going to say here profile image varchar. I'm going to store the path of my profile picture in this column. So I'm going to specify here varchar 255. And the last, I'm going to just specify register date. And here I'm going to specify date and time. Specify semicolon. And when you click on this button, go, this will create a new table for you. When I click on it, you can notice a status message, MySQL return an empty result set, 0 rows, and you will have your table. So you can notice here in the register DB, you have your user table, right? If you just take a look at your user table, if you click on these columns, you can notice you have few columns to this register table. Now let me store all these values of this registration form in this table. So if you just take a look at this table, when you click on it, we don't have any value in it. So let me show you how you can store all these values in this database and register the new user. I will just open my editor in the register process.php file, if this expression return true, then I'm going to just execute this if statement. Otherwise, I'm going to execute this else statement. So if there is no error in these input fields, then I'm going to execute this if statement. So in this if statement, I'm going to register the user. So I'm going to create a comment here and say register a new user. Here I'm going to first hash the password. Now keep in mind, as per the Data Protection Act, you can't store the user password in the standard string. If you do that, then anyone can see the user password in your database. So what you need to do is, you just need to get the user password and hash it and then store in the database. Let me show you how you can do that. So you need to just use password hash method to hash the password of the user. I'm going to create here a new variable and say hashed code, or you can say hash password. So I'm going to say hash pass, and using password hash function, I'm going to just hash this password and store it in this variable. So I'm going to simply specify here password and specify the second parameter password default. So this algorithm will convert your simple standard string password into hash value and store that in this variable. Once you've done that, I'm going to just get my connection string. So I'm going to just require this file in this process. So I'm going to just say here require, and in the single quote, I'm going to call MySQLi connect.php. Once you require this file, you can access this connection variable. So now here I'm going to first create a MySQL query. So I'm going to say here make a query. So I'm going to create a simple command, make a query, and right here I'm going to create a variable query, and here I'm going to store in the string SQL statement. So I need to store a value in the database. So as you know, we are going to just simply use insert into command to insert value in the MySQL database. So I'm going to just say here insert into, and I want to insert all this value in the user table. So I'm going to say here user, and then I want to specify the columns. So in this parenthesis, I'm going to specify the columns. So as you know, we have the first column user ID, then we have the first name, last name, email, password, and the profile image and the registration date. Now keep in mind, the column name is exactly the same as you specify in this database. So in this parenthesis, I'm going to specify user ID, then the second column is going to be the first name. So I'm going to just specify here first name, then I'm going to specify the last name, third column, then I'm going to specify email, then password, then profile image, and then I'm going to specify register date. So I'm going to say here register date. So as you can see, I just specify all these columns in this parenthesis. So, and just out of that, instead of adding values in the same row, I'm going to just specify here semicolon, and on the next row, I'm going to just call query variable and just concatenate my values. So I'm going to say here dot equal to, and in the double quote, I'm going to specify values to these columns. So in this double quote, I'm going to say values, and in the parenthesis, I'm going to specify values to these columns. So as you can see, I have the user ID column, so I'm going to specify value to this user ID. So I'm going to specify here 1. As you can see, I need to specify value to this first column. Now what I want to generate the automatic value for this first column. So I'm going to get rid of this value from this parenthesis. Back to the table, I'm going to add auto increment feature to this user ID column. So I'm going to just expand this user, click on this user ID, and just check this auto increment checkbox, this one, and save all the changes. When I save the changes, you can notice you have the extra section where you have auto increment value. So you don't need to specify any value to this first column. When you add anything in these columns, this column will automatically take the value. MySQL will automatically specify value for this first column. you can specify auto increment while creating a table as well. Now, just after that, once I have user table, I'm going to just specify values to these columns. The first column will automatically take the value, so I'm going to leave empty string here, just like this. Then I'm going to specify the second value. So I'm going to specify here question mark, because I'm going to bind the value using MySQLi statement bind function. So I'm going to specify here question mark for the first name, question mark for the second name, specify comma, specify question mark for the email, same for the password, profile image, and then for this registration, I'm going to specify here now. So I'm going to say here now and specify parentheses. This now function will return the current row, date and time in the database. Now, just after that, once I specify the binding values to these columns, I'm going to specify here semicolon. Just after that, right down here, I'm going to just call a MySQL function. So I'm going to just say here MySQLi statement initialize. So this function initialize a statement and return an object suitable for MySQLi statement parameter. So I'm going to just initialize this statement using connection property. So I'm going to specify connection here, and we need to store this object into a variable. So I'm going to create a variable and specify the variable name Q. If you want, you can specify any name to this variable, and I'm going to specify semicolon here. I'm going to create here a command and say initialize statement. Just out of that, I'm going to just create here a prepare statement. So I'm going to just prepare an SQL statement for execution. Always use prepare statement to secure your database from MySQL injection. So I'm going to secure my database MySQL injection. So I'm going to use here MySQLi statement prepare function. So I'm going to just say here prepare SQL statement, and I'm going to just call here MySQLi stmt prepare statement. So I'm going to call a function MySQLi statement prepare, and in the first parameter you need to specify the initialize object. So I'm going to specify here Q, and in the second parameter you need to specify the query string. So you know that we have the query string in the query variable, so I'm going to specify that variable in the second parameter. Just after that, you need to bind all your input text box values with this statement. So I'm going to just create here a new command and say bind values, and here I'm going to simply call a function, and I'm going to say here MySQLi statement. So I'm going to say stmt bind parameter. Now this function will bind the values with this statement. So in the first parameter, so I'm going to specify here Q. The next parameter is going to be the type of values I'm going to insert in the database. So in the single quote, I'm going to specify types. So in the first name, I'm going to insert string value. So I'm going to say here S for string. For the last name, I'm going to insert string value. So I'm going to say here S for string. Email is also string. Password is also string. And then the profile image is also string. We don't need to care about this user ID and this register date column, because we already specify values here in the statement. Just after that, for the last parameter, you need to specify values to these columns. So I'm going to specify here first name, then I'm going to specify last name. So I'm going to call all these variables, these ones, all these sanitized variables in this statement. Then I'm going to call here email, and instead of calling here password, I'm going to call here hash password. So I'm going to store hash password value in the database. Now, if you just take a look at this column, then you will notice we don't have any variable to store in this column. So I'm going to just create a demo variable here, up here, just for now. And I'm going to specify profile image name for this variable, and I'm going to store here image. Just out of that, I'm going to specify this variable and bind this variable in this statement. So I'm going to specify here profile image, just like this. And at the last, I'm going to specify semicolon. Once I bind all these values, we need to execute this statement. So once we execute this statement, we are going to insert all that values in the database. So I'm going to simply call here a command execute statement, and using a function MySQLi statement, MySQLi stmt execute function, I'm going to execute this statement. So in this parameter, you need to specify this variable. Now I just wanted to know the statement is successfully inserted or not. I'm going to just call here if MySQLi statement affected rows, and I'm going to specify here q. Now if this function return 1, then I'm going to execute here echo, or you can just call here print, and I'm going to say here record successfully inserted. Or if there is any problem, then I'm going to simply say here print error while registration. Don't forget to specify semicolon at the end of this statement. Save all the changes and just reload your registration page. And now let me just fill this information and register as a new user. So I'm going to just specify here first name daily tuition, the last name is going to be tuition. Then I'm going to specify email example@gmail.com. Then I'm going to specify password. Check this checkbox and click on this continue. When I click on it, you can see the error message password not match. Let me just add one more character here, and when I click on this continue button, you can see a message record successfully inserted. Now if I just take a look at my table, when I click on this user, you can notice I have value in this table. So this is my first name daily, the last name tuition, the email address example@gmail.com, the password. You can notice in the password we just store the hash value, so no one can read the password of the user. Just out of that, I'm going to have the profile image, the image default value, and the registration date. And you can also notice here in the user ID, the MySQL database will automatically specify first value to this first row. So using auto increment, this will automatically specify value to your new row. Now what I want to get the user image URL and specify that in this profile image column. So using this value, I can display the profile image. I can display the profile image of the user. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to just back to my editor, and right here, instead of specifying this default value, I'm going to just get the value from this form, and I'm going to just get the value from this input type file element. Using this input type file element, I'm going to get the profile image of the user and just move that image in this profile folder. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to move this phase 1 and phase 2 image in this asset. So I'm going to just grab it and move this in the asset just like this. And now I'm going to create a new PHP function which helps us to get the image from the user and move that image in this profile folder. Let me show you how to do that. Now if you just take a look at this input type file, you can notice this input is out of this form tag. Then how do you get the value of this input type file? In HTML5, you can get the value of your input element anywhere in the file using form ID. To get the value of this input type file, you need to specify this ID to this input type file. So you can get the value of this input type file element. As you can notice, I just specify here name profile upload, and you know that using post variable you can get the value of input element. But this input element is outside of this form. So we need to specify here an attribute form and specify this ID like this. So in HTML5, you can access any value from any input element outside of the form as well. So now I'm going to access the value of this input type file outside of the form. Save the changes. Back to the register process.php file. So right here I'm going to create a new variable files. And to these files, I'm going to just get the value of the file name using files global variable. So I'm going to call here $_files, and from the array of these files, I'm going to get the value of input type file element. So as you know, we specify here profile upload name for this input type file. So I'm going to get that input value right in this variable. So I'm going to specify here profile upload and specify semicolon. So now when I select a new profile image, I'm going to get the image path in this variable. Now once I have this image, I want to sanitize this image and move that uploaded image in the server. So what I want, when the user submit a new profile image, I want to store that image inside this profile folder. So I'm going to just create a new function for that. So in the helper.php file, I'm going to create here a new function for profile. So I'm going to say here profile image. I'm going to create a new function here and say upload profile. And now I'm going to just pass parameter to it, and I'm going to say here file name. So now when I call this function, I'm going to just pass this value to that function. Now in this function, I'm going to simply create a variable target directory. So I'm going to say here target dir is equal to, in the double quote, I'm going to specify the targeted directory where I want to store the uploaded image. So you know that I want to store that uploaded image in this profile folder. So I'm going to specify here $/assets profile. And just after that, I'm going to specify here semicolon. And now I'm going to just create here one more variable, which is default. And in this variable, I'm going to specify the default image I want to display in this profile image section. So you know that this is the default image. So I'm going to just specify that name beard.png in this default variable. So I'm going to say here beard.png. So if the user did not specify any profile picture, I'm going to just store the default image in the profile image column. Now, right down here in this function, I'm going to just get the file name. So I'm going to create a variable for that file name, and using base name function, I'm going to get the file name. If the user upload their profile picture, then this variable contains the whole path of that profile picture. So we need to just get the name of the file using this function base name. And in the parameter of this base name function, I'm going to specify file name and just get the name of the file using array key name. Just out of that, I'm going to just get the targeted directory and store that in the variable. So I'm going to say here target file path, and I'm going to get the path of that file and store that in this variable. So I'm going to say here targeted directory and just concatenate the file name. So in this variable, I have the path of this file. Just out of that, I'm going to call a simple path info function to get the file extension. I want to filter the profile image, so I'm going to use path info function here. So I'm going to create here a variable file type, and I'm going to just specify function to it, path info. And in the first parameter, I'm going to specify targeted file path. And in the second parameter, I'm going to specify path info extension. Now, let me just explain this function. This is the built-in function which is used to return the information about the path using an associative array or the string. Now, this function is going to return the extension of the file in this variable. So we'll understand the extension of the uploaded image. Once I know that the type of the image, I'm going to just say here, if this variable, the file name variable is not empty, I'm going to allow the user to insert certain file format in the database. So I'm going to create here a command and say allow certain file format. And I'm going to just create here a variable allow type. And I'm going to specify array to this variable. I'm going to say here array. And in the values, I'm going to specify JPG. I'm going to allow user to upload JPG files. Then I'm going to allow user to insert PNG file. Then I'm going to allow user to insert JPEG file. And then I'm gonna allow user to insert GIF file. And the last, I'm gonna just allow user to insert PDF file. If you want, you can remove this file extension from this array as well. I'm gonna leave it as it is. Now once I filter the image, I'm gonna say here if in array. So if in the array, I'm gonna just specify first parameter is going to be the file type, and the second parameter is going to be allow type. So if this expression return true, if the extension of our file is match any of these extension, then I'm going to execute this if statement. Now in this if statement, I'm going to upload the file in the server. So I'm going to just call here a command and say upload file to the server. And here I'm going to say if, and in this if statement, I'm going to just call a function move uploaded file. So this function will move the uploaded file in the server directory. So I'm going to just move the uploaded file in this profile directory. And now in the parentheses of this function, I want to specify the file name which I want to upload in the profile directory. So I'm going to specify the temporary name for the file. So I'm going to simply call here file name. I'm going to call this variable file name, and in the square bracket, I'm going to just call here temp name. So this will just specify the temporary name for the file. And in the second parameter, I'm going to specify where I want to upload this file. So I want to upload this file in the asset in the profile folder. So I'm going to specify this targeted file path here. So I'm going to just specify here targeted file path, just like this. And if this condition became true, I'm going to execute this if statement, and I'm going to just return the targeted file path. So I'm going to just return the targeted file path, and I'm going to have my image path using this function. Now if this function return false, right down here, I'm going to return the default image. So I'm going to say here return default image. So I'm going to simply return here in the double quote, I'm going to specify dot assets, and then I'm going to specify profile, and I'm going to just concatenate the value of this default variable, just like this. Now just out of that, I'm going to save all the changes back to my register process.php file, and here I'm going to call this function. So I'm going to copy this function and paste it right here. So I'm going to get rid of this hard-coded value and paste this function here. And we need to pass parameter to it. So in the parentheses, I'm going to pass files. Save the changes. Now as you can notice, if we just take a look at this function, then this is not the pure function because we specify the hard-coded path in this function. What if you want to change this path in the future? In that case, you need to just edit this function. So to solve this problem, I'm going to just specify a new parameter to this function path, and just specify this path right here like this. And I'm going to do the same right here as well. Get rid of this hard-coded value, specify path, and when I call this function, I'm going to just specify path, assets, and profile. I'm going to save all the changes, save this file as well, and now just reload this browser. Let me just upload my image. And now let me just fill this information. So I'm going to first choose my profile image. So I'm going to select this phase 2 image, this one. When I select it, you can see we have the profile image here. I'm going to specify name, daily tuition. Then I'm going to specify email, example1@gmail.com. Then the password is going to be this one. Agree the terms and condition and click on the continue button and submit your form. When I click on it, oops, something is missing here. Illegal string offset temp name on the header.php file. Let me just check this error. Oops, I think I misspelled something here in this function. Now you can notice I just duplicate these variable names. I specify the same parameter name for the variable, and I have the same variable name here as well. I'm going to just change these to file like this. copy this variable, specify that in this parameter, and I'm going to do the same for this move uploaded file function as well, like this. Save the changes, back to the registration form, specify your image, specify password, agree the terms and condition, and click on this continue button. When I click on it, you can notice the message record successfully inserted. Now if you just take a look at your MySQL database, if I just log in to my SQL database, you have your phase2.jpg file in the profile image column. Now if you just open your editor and if you open your project, and you can see here in the profile you have phase2.jpg file as well. I'm going to just copy the file from the local host in the server directory. You can notice I have here two files, the default file and this phase2.jpg file. Now for example, if I register a new user, if I just select a new image here, this one, phase1, open it, specify the same information to this user as well, and when I press continue, I'm going to have the same message, record successfully inserted, and I'm going to have this record in this database right here, and you have your phase1 image. And if you just take a look at your project, you can notice you have your phase1.jpg file. So the file is automatically uploaded to your profile folder. And now we need to just redirect the user to the login.php file instead of displaying this message. So I'm going to get rid of this message, and here in this if statement, if we register the user successfully, I'm going to just say here header, and in this function I'm going to specify location of the login.php file, and I'm going to just exit from this page. Save the changes, back to the browser. Let me just reload the browser, select the user, first name, last name is going to be tuition, email is going to be example3@gmail.com, then the password, agree the terms and condition, and click on submit. When I click on it, this will just redirect me to the login.php file. And now you know that how you can register a new user in PHP. Now you know that how easy it is to create this registration form using PHP. And you know that how to sanitize the user input and store it in your database. Now once you understand how you can create a new registration form and register a user, let's see how we can allow user to log in your website. So now once the new user registered with this registration form, he will redirect to the login.php file. So let's open the login.php file and design it. So I'm going to first say here login.php. So this will just open login.php file, and in this file I just echo login.php. If you just take a look at your register process.php file, you can notice we just echo login.php here. We're just going to redirect the user to the login.php, and in this file I'm going to just echo login.php. Now I'm going to just design this login.php very quickly. So I'm going to show you the easiest way to design this login page. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just get the registration. I'm going to copy all the code and paste it in the login.php right here, just like this. And now we just need to make a few changes in it. So the first changes we need to do is we just need to get rid of this statement, and I'm going to change this ID, and I'm going to say here login form. Then I'm going to just change this text, and I'm going to just specify here login, and I'm going to just change this text as well, and I'm going to say here login and enjoy additional features. And I'm going to just say here if you are not the registered user, then please first register with the registration form. So I'm going to say here create a new account. So I'm going to say here create a new account, and I'm going to specify here register.php file. And now I'm going to get rid of this text, these 3 lines. I'm going to get rid of this image, this small tag, and this input type file. So I'm going to just get rid of these 3 lines, and I'm going to get rid of this deflex division tag. So I'm going to grab this image and get rid of this division tag, paste the image again, and I'm going to just change this image. I'm going to specify asset, then specify profile, and I'm going to just specify my default image here, beard.png. Alt attribute is going to be default profile. Then I'm going to just change this registration form as well. So in the action attribute, you need to specify login. So I'm going to post all the data to the login.php file to itself. Then the method is going to be post. I will leave everything as it is. Just change this ID of this form and say log form. We already specify login form ID to this section, so don't duplicate the ID. And then I'm going to just get rid of this form row because I don't need first name and last name, so I'm going to get rid of it. I need email, so I'm going to leave it as it is, and I need this password, so I'm going to leave it as it is. And the last, I'm going to get rid of this checkbox and the confirm password text box. Save the changes, and I'm going to just get rid of this value attribute from this email, and that's it. And just change this continue to login. Save the changes. Let's execute this file. So I'm going to reload it. So now you can see you have this login page. Now let's back to the style.css where you can style this file. So I'm going to back to the style.css, and here I'm going to add the background image. So at the top right here, you know that we just specify register, and to this register I specified background image. So I'm going to say here login form. Save the changes, reload it. When you reload it, you can see I have the background image to this login. Then I'm going to just specify some style to this image. Now instead of specifying style to this image, I'm going to just back to my register.php file. We just open my register.php, and in this file, you know that we just specify here an image, the beard image, and we also have style to it, this one. So I'm going to copy this image tag completely from here, copy it, and in the login.php, I'm going to specify that right here. So I'm going to replace this image tag with this image. Save the changes, reload the browser. So I'm going to have my profile picture here. And now I want to first close these unwanted tabs. So I'm going to close these unwanted tabs from here. In the style.css file, you know that we style the input text boxes using this registration form. I'm going to do the same. So I'm going to copy these three selectors, specify here comma, and duplicate it. But at this time, you need to change this reg form to login form, or you can just say here log form. You just need to change this selector registration form to log form. Save the changes and reload the browser. When we reload it, you can see you have your login and the password. Now I just want to remove this border as well. So I'm going to just copy these three selectors, and you know that we just remove this blue border using these properties. So I'm going to specify my CSS selector here like this. Save the changes, reload the browser, and I don't have that blue border to these input text boxes. I don't want to allow user to autofill this email and password, so I'm not going to specify value to this input, email, and the password. I just want to add some space between this create, so I'm going to just add here some space like this. And now I just wanted to add some padding to this login, so I'm going to just back to my style.css, and here I'm going to just select this login form like this, and just specify padding here, and the padding is going to be 8% for the top and bottom, and 0 for the left and right. Save the changes, reload the browser. You're going to have the padding to this login page. If you want to add more padding, you can do that as well. If I just say here 10%, then that's fine, right? That's good. Now you know that how easy it is to create this beautiful login page. Now let's see how you can add login functionality to this login page. So when the user specify a correct email and the password, we're going to redirect the user to the main page of the website. So let's see how to do it. So I'm going to back to my editor, and in this editor I'm going to create a new file for this login process. So in the project, I'm going to right click here and say new PHP file. And I'm going to specify name for this file. I'm going to say here login process. So I'm going to specify here login process.php, and in this file I'm going to just first validate this user input. So I'm going to just open the register process.php file, and right up here you know that we just validate users using this code. So I'm going to just grab this code. So I'm going to first get this email. So I'm going to copy this code and paste it in the login process.php file right here. Then I'm going to just validate the user password. So I'm going to open the register process.php, and right here I'm going to copy this password and paste it here in the login process.php file. And now to store the errors, I'm going to just create here a variable error, and I'm going to just specify array to it, an empty array. Just after that, once I validate the user, I just want to say here if this variable is empty, then I'm going to just execute this if statement, or I'm going to just execute this else statement. So in the else statement, I'm going to say echo please fill out email and password to login. So if the login form find any error in this variable, I'm going to just execute this else statement, and if there is no error in this variable, I'm going to just execute this if statement. And now in this if statement right here, I'm going to create a query. So I'm going to say here SQL Query, and I'm going to create here a variable query, and in the double quote I'm going to say select user ID. So I'm going to select my user ID, this one, user ID. Then I'm going to select my first name, last name, email, password, and profile image. So I'm going to select it. So I'm going to select here user ID. Then I have first name. Then I'm going to select last name. Then I have here email, password, and profile image. So I'm going to specify here email, password, and profile image. And I'm going to just say here from user. So I'm going to get the values of these columns from this user table. So you know that we have the user table here, and in this table we have these different columns. So I'm going to get the values of these columns using select statement. I'm going to just call here where condition, where email is equal to a question mark. So what I'm going to do is, if the email is equal to this input text box, I want to fetch the row. For example, if I just type this first email in this text box and specify the password of this email, and if I click on this continue, I want to just redirect user to index.php file. So the successful user will redirect to the index.php file, which is the main file of your website. So I'm going to just specify here if the email is equal to the text box, I'm going to create a variable q is equal to MySQLi statement initialize. I'm going to just initialize this statement, specify connection parameter just like this. Then I'm going to just say here MySQLi statement prepare, and in this parameter you need to specify the queue and the query. So I'm going to just specify the prepare connection object and the query, and just out of that I'm going to just bind the parameter. So I'm going to just call here MySQLi stmt bind parameter, and in this bind parameter I'm going to just specify first queue, then specify the type. I'm going to insert string value in this text box, so I'm going to specify s here, and then I just want to specify value to this email. So I'm going to just specify here email like this. So this value will bind right here. So I'm going to just get all these columns value from this table where the email is equal to this input text box value. Now just out of that I'm going to just execute this query. So I'm going to say here execute query, and I'm going to call here MySQLi stmt execute, and I'm going to specify here q. Just after that, once you execute this query, you're going to get the result from this query. So you need to store that result in the variable. So once this statement is executed, you're going to have a one row from the table. For example, if you specify here example at @gmail.com, then you will get this row, the first row. So once you have your first row, you need to store that in a variable. So I'm going to just create here a variable result, and I'm going to just say here MySQLi stmt get result, and here I'm going to specify q, and just out of that I'm going to get this result in the associative array. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call here MySQLi fetch array. So this is the function fetch a result of row as an associative array or a numeric array, or both, depending on your parameter. So in this function, I'm going to specify the result, and I want this array as MySQLi associative array. Associative array means I'm going to have key and value pair as a result. So I'm going to get these values of these columns with key and value pair, and I'm going to store this in the variable. So I'm going to create here variable row and store this array. Now this is the type of array, and in this array I'm going to have values of these columns. For example, let's say you want to get the value of email. You will just simply specify here row, and to this row in the square bracket you just specify the column name email. So once you specify email here, this will just return the value of your email column. I'm going to just get rid of this text, and now what I want, I'm going to just say here if it is not empty, if this row is not empty, then I'm going to execute this if statement, and now I'm going to verify the password. So I'm going to say here verify password, and you know that we just store all the password in hash values. So once the user specify password in this password field, you can't compare both this password without converting the user password in the hash value. So what you need to do is you just need to call here if, and now in this if statement you need to call a PHP function password verify. Now this function will verify the password from this input text box and the database. So this will just convert this input text box password into hash value and compare it with this database hash value, and if it is matched, then this will execute this if statement. So right here in this parenthesis I'm going to specify password. So I'm going to just specify here row, and in the square bracket I'm going to get the password, and now I'm going to say if this condition, this expression became true, I'm going to just redirect the user to the welcome page. So I'm going to just say here header, and in the double quote I'm going to say location, and I'm going to redirect the user to index.php file, which is the main file of this application. And just after that I'm going to say here exit, and then right here I'm going to say if this condition, this expression return false, I'm going to just return here else statement, and in the else I'm going to say print you are not a member, please register. You just need to add the MySQLi connect file in this login process.php file, but instead of adding the MySQLi connect file in this process file, I'm going to just add this file in the login.php. So right up here at the top I'm going to create here a PHP statement, and I'm going to just call here require, and I'm going to call here MySQLi connect file. And before I redirect the user to index.php, I just wanted to create that file first. So I'm going to right click on my project and create a new PHP file, index.php, And in this file, I'm going to just say here print welcome to daily tuition. Save the changes. And now let's fill this form and register as a new user. So I'm going to first select my profile, specify first name, last name, then specify email. So I'm going to say here ex@gmail.com, then specify password. Check this checkbox and press continue. When I press continue, this will redirect me to the login.php file. If you want to add the successful message, you can do that as well, but I will directly redirect the user to the login page. And now I'm going to just specify my email and the password. So I'm going to say here ex@gmail.com, and I'm going to specify here password, this one. So if you just take a look at your user table, you can see we have email ex@gmail.com, and this is my password. So I'm going to just specify this email and the password here and just press login. When I click on this login, nothing happened. That is because you did not call this login process file in the login.php. So I'm going to just call this login file in this login.php. I'm going to just back to the register.php file, and right here you can notice I have here a simple if statement where I just require the file of the register. So I'm going to copy this if statement and paste it in this login.php file right down here, and I'm going to just change this file. So I'm going to just change this file to login process.php and save all the changes, reload the browser. I'm going to have an error here, uncatch error call undefined function. That is because we just use here this validate input email function, but we did not add it helper file in this login. So I just need to first include that file as well. So I'm going to say here include helper.php. Save the changes, reload the browser. You can see we have a message, welcome to daily tuition. Now your login is now successfully ready. Let me just back to my login page, and now I just want to specify the password, and when I click on this login, you can log in to your website. Now what I want, when the user successfully register, I want to display that user profile right here instead of displaying this default profile. So I just want to display here a register user profile here. So I'm going to just get that profile using session ID. So I'm going to back to my editor, open the register process.php file. Right down here, before this header, I'm going to just start here a session, a new session. So I'm going to create here a command and say start a new session. A session is a way to store information, for example, in a variable to be used across multiple pages. So I'm going to create here a session variable to access the user ID. So I'm going to just start the session first. So before you create a session variable, you need to start the session. So just specify here session start. So this function will start the session, and then I'm going to just create a new variable. So I'm going to say here create session variable. And to create a session variable, it's very simple. We just need to call here $sign and just call a global variable session. And in the array of this session variable, you need to specify variable name. So I'm going to just specify here user ID. You can specify any name here. So when the user register with this register.php file, I'm going to just get the register user ID and store that in this variable. So I'm going to get the current user ID using a function MySQLi insert ID. So this will just return the current inserted ID of the user, and this will just store that ID in this variable. So in the parentheses of this function, you need to specify the connection parameter like this, and that's it. Now once you have your ID, I can access this ID on login.php file as well. So using this ID, I'm going to get the information of the user and display the user profile on the login page. Let me show you how you can do that. So I'm going to simply back to the helper.php file, because in that file, I'm going to create a helper function to get all the information about the new user. And right here, I'm going to create a new function and I'm going to name that function. I'm going to create a comment here, get user info, and I'm going to create here a function and name that function user info, or you can say get user info, like this. So now using this function, I'm going to get all the information of the user using their ID. So in this parameter of this function, so right here, I'm going to specify here connection. So when we call this function, we need to pass the connection object here. And in the second parameter, I'm going to specify user ID. So when we call this function, we need to pass the user ID as well. You know that we already have the user ID in the session variable right here. I'm going to just pass this session variable in the function when we call it. Now just out of that, in this function, I'm going to just get all the information of the user which has this user ID. For example, if I have here 1, then I'm going to get all the information of the first user, right? Because the user ID is 1, I'm going to get the user info of the first user. So in this function, I'm going to just first say query. I'm going to create here a query, SQL query, and in the double quote, I'm going to say select first name, last name, email, and profile image from user. So this is the table name, user, and I'm going to add a condition here where user ID is equal to a question mark. So I'm going to bind here a value of this parameter. So I'm going to just say here, if the user ID is equal to this, then I want the first name, last name, email, and the profile image. I'm going to create a variable q, and I'm going to call a function MySQLi stmt initialize. So I'm going to specify here connection property. So I'm going to just initialize this query with the connection object, and then I'm going to create a prepare statement. So I'm going to just say here MySQLi stmt prepare, and I'm going to just pass the q variable and the query. Just out of that, I'm going to bind the statement, or you can say the parameter. So I'm going to simply call here MySQLi stmt bind parameter, and I just wanted to bind this value right here. So I'm going to first specify here q object, then I'm going to specify the type. So I'm going to specify here integer. So this value is a type of integer, and then I'm going to specify value here, user ID. Just out that, I'm going to execute this statement, SQL statement. So I'm going to say here execute SQL statement, and I'm going to just say here MySQLi stmt execute, and just specify here q. Just out of that, I just wanted to get the result from this select statement, because select statement will return the value from these columns. So I'm going to get that result in the variable. I'm going to create here result variable and get all the values using a function MySQLi stmt get result, and specify here q. Just out of that, I'm going to get the result as associative array. So I'm going to just create here a variable row and store that array in this row variable, and I'm going to call a function here MySQLi fetch array, and I'm going to specify here result. And now at the last, I'm going to just return this array. So I'm going to say here if this variable is empty, if this row is empty, then I'm going to return false, else I'm going to return row. If this variable is empty, I'm going to return false. If we have the values of the user in this variable, I'm going to return that variable. But now I just want to simplify this if statement. How will you simplify this if statement? Yes, you're right, using if and else conditional statement. If you want to simplify this statement, then you just need to say here return empty, then specify here row. If this statement became true, I'm going to specify here question mark. If this expression became true, I'm going to return false or return row. So I'm going to just specify here, if this condition became true, I'm going to return this false, then specify colon, and then specify here the else value, semicolon. And now I'm going to get rid of this if statement because we don't need it. Now our function is completely ready. Now we can get the user information using this function. So we have this function in helper.php file. If we just open the login.php, we already included this helper.php, so we can use this function in this login.php. So I'm going to just use that function. So just after this require statement of MySQLi connect, I'm going to just say here if is set, and here I'm going to call a session variable user ID in the single quote, and then I'm going to create a variable user which is type of array. So I'm going to create this variable up here, user is equal to array, and in this if statement, if we have the value in this session variable, I'm going to just say here user is equal to, then I'm going to call this function get user info right here. And you know that we specify two parameters to this function. So I'm going to first specify the connection and then specify the user ID. So I'm going to copy this session ID and specify here. Save the changes. And now once I have all the information of the user in this array, of this user array, I can get the user profile and display that user profile here. So let me just back to my login.php, and right here you can notice we just specify the default value here. I just want to get rid of this default value and specify the profile image. So I'm going to create here PHP statement like this in the source attribute, and I'm going to say here echo is set if the value of this variable is set. So I'm going to call here user, and in the square bracket I'm going to call profile image. You know that we have different information of the user in this user variable. So I'm going to get the profile image from this user variable. So if the value is not empty, then I'm going to return user, and I'm going to specify here profile image. So I'm going to return the profile image, or I'm going to return the default value. So this is going to be the default value. So I'm going to get that default value and just specify that here like this. Specify semicolon, save the changes, back to the register.php file. Now let's register as a new user. So I'm going to just specify my profile picture, first name, last name, email @gmail.com, password, check the agreement policy, and when I click on this continue, you can notice I'm going to have my profile picture on the login page as well. When I click on it, oops, I just misspelled something. In the login system, everything is correct. Yeah, right here, I just forgot to add session start to the login page. If you want to access the session variable, you need to start a session first. So right up here, I'm going to say session start. So this will start the session, so we can access the variable which we created in the previous page. Save the changes, reload the browser, and I'm going to have my profile picture here. As simple as that. Now we know that how we can get the profile picture of the user. So let me just specify the email ex@gmail.com, specify password, press login to log in as a new user. Once I specify login, I'm going to have the welcome to daily tuition. And now at the last, I want to display all the information of the user on this page. So I'm going to just simply back to my index.php file. And right here, I'm going to display all the information of the user. So on the index.php file, I'm going to just display all the information of the user. So I'm going to first start the session. So I'm going to say here session start. Then I'm going to say include. And right here, I'm going to first add header.php file. And just after that, I'm going to include helper.php file. So in this file, we have different functions. I'm going to get rid of this message, and just after that I'm going to just see here if is set. I'm going to call the session variable user ID here, user ID. Now keep in mind the variable name is exactly same which you have created. So I'm going to just specify here user ID. If we have the value in this variable, I'm going to just require the MySQLi file. So I'm going to say here MySQLi connect.php, and then I'm going to just create here a variable user, and I'm going to just say here get user info, specify the connection object, and then specify the session variable, this one, user ID. Now you know that we have all the information in this variable, so I'm going to first globally create this variable user is equal to array. So I'm going to access all the information of this user using this array, and now just out of that I'm going to close this PHP syntax right here just like this, and just out of that I'm going to create here a section tag. So I'm going to say here section, and I'm going to just specify ID to it and say main site. This is the ID of this section, and before I develop this section I just want to say here call the PHP statement and just specify here include footer.php. Just out of that, in this section I'm going to create a container, and also I want to add padding by 5. So this will add top and bottom padding to this division tag. Just out of that I'm going to create here a row, then I'm going to create column 4 offset 4, and I'm going to just add some shadow. So I'm going to add a bootstrap class shadow, and then add padding by 4. So this will add top and bottom padding to this division tag. Then in this div I'm going to create another div to display the user profile. So I'm going to specify here a class to this div, upload profile image, and along with that I'm going to add some bootstrap classes, deflex, justify, content center, and I'm going to add padding bottom 5. Now just out of that I'm going to just add here img tag, and in the source attribute I'm not going to specify the hard-coded value. Instead I'm going to get the value from this variable. So I'm going to call here PHP, so I'm going to call here in the source attribute, I'm going to call here a PHP syntax just like this, and call a PHP statement echo is set, and just call here user profile image, and if we have value in this variable I'm going to just return that value. So I'm going to copy this variable, paste it here, or I'm going to return the default value. So I'm going to specify colon and specify default value here. So I'm going to specify the asset folder, profile, and specify beard.png file. Just out of that I'm going to save all the changes and reload the browser. When I reload it, you can see I have this image here. Now I just want to add some classes and width to this image. So I'm going to just back to my editor, and right here to this img tag I'm going to first specify class, and the class is going to be img. So this is the custom class. Then I'm going to specify rounded circle, save the changes. This will specify border radius to this image. When I reload it, you can see. Then I'm going to specify height and width to this image. So using inline style I'm going to first specify width, which is going to be 200 pixel, and then I'm going to specify height is going to be 200 pixel, and I'm going to save the changes and reload the browser. I'm going to have this image here. Now what I want to display the first name and the last name of the user just down here, just after this profile picture. So I'm going to back to my editor, and just after this image right down here I'm going to create here h4 heading tag. So I'm going to say here h4, and in this h4 heading tag I'm going to create a PHP syntax. So I'm going to add here a PHP syntax, and I'm going to specify here class to this h4 heading tag first. Class is going to be padding by 3. So this will add top and bottom padding to this h4 heading tag. I'm going to just call here if is set, and in the is set I'm going to specify user first name. Now we know that we have the first name column in the database. So I'm going to get the value of the first name if this expression return true, then I'm going to just say printf. I'm going to just add here %sign and specify s. So it means I'm going to add here a string value. So this will become my first name. Then I'm going to add here %sign and s value again. So this will become my last name variable value. And now just out of that, I'm going to specify here comma. I'm going to just specify here user and specify first name, specify comma, and then specify user last name. That's it. So I'm going to have both these values here. So I'm going to just print that value just out of this image. Now let me just save the changes, reload the browser. When I reload it, you can see I have the division name here. I'm going to just wrap this both element in the division tag and center it. So I'm going to say here text center. I'm going to specify text center bootstrap class. I'm going to paste the image and the h4 heading tag. Save the changes, reload the browser, right? So I'm going to have the division name and the user. Now what I want to get more information about the user. So I'm going to get that. So I'm going to back to my editor, and just out of that, right here, so just before this column, I'm going to just create a new division tag. So I'm going to say here user info. Along with that, I'm going to specify padding x3. So this will specify left and right padding to this div. And here I'm going to add ul tag, another list, specify classes to it. I'm going to add font Ubuntu. You know that we use this class to change the font family. Then I'm going to add navbar nav. Now this is the bootstrap class. I'm going to add navbar nav. Then I'm going to just create here li tag with the class nav link. And in this li, I'm going to add b tag, which is a bold tag. And here I'm going to say first name. And I just want to display my first name here. So I'm going to specify first name, add a span tag. And in this span tag, I'm going to display my first name. So I'm going to just grab this statement from here. I'm going to just grab this statement, this image statement right from here, just like this, and just paste it here inside this span tag. And now I'm going to just change the values here. So I'm going to change this profile image to first name, and this also became first name. Now if I have value in this first name, I'm going to just display it, or I'm going to just return nothing. So I'm going to just specify empty string here. Now I'm going to just copy this li tag, paste it down here, and paste it here. Now I'm going to just display the last name. So I'm going to specify here last. This became last name. Copy it, specify here, and this became email. I'm going to copy this email, specify here, and change this text to email like this. Save the changes, and now reload the browser. Right now you can see we have all the information of the user, and now I want to add a shadow to this panel. So I'm going to just add here. Oops, I think I misspelled here, shadow. Yeah, that's right. Reload the browser. That's it. Now you can see I have all the information of the user on the welcome page. Now you know that how to create your beautiful registration and login system using PHP and MySQL database. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. So if you find anything useful, then make sure you subscribe to this channel and press the like button. Share this video with your friends, and if you want to support this channel, then the Patreon link is in the description. I always love to make beautiful tutorials for you. So that is all for now. I will see you in the next one with a new video.